All right, guys. I'm super excited about this.
Me too.
Um, yeah, so we're gonna do a Boston mental game prep. Shannon's gonna lead us. Before we get rolling, couple of quick things. Number one is if you are not Shannon or me at the moment, if you can put yourself on mute so we don't get that background noise. And then I do want to say that we're going to have like a Q&A session at the end. And if you guys want to put comments in the chat section, I will follow up with those and feed them to Shannon at the end. So please, fill up some Q&As for us. Couple of other really quick things. Anyone that's not a current Run Free athlete that's on the call, always we're available for a free consult if you want some coaching or help with your training. Number two, we have a camp this summer. June 19th is the start date. I believe Shannon's going to be there, and along with a bunch of other really good speakers and really good content for you guys in Flagstaff. And you can sign up on the Run Free training website. And that's basically it. Yeah, let's kick this thing off. So I love chatting with Shannon. We've gotten to hang out several times and do a couple podcasts together. And I've taken away so many good nuggets from our conversations. And I was excited to set this up as a more kind of like marathon Boston specific. How do we approach the mental game, the internal game, and create more success around marathoning and specifically around Boston? And we are recording this, so if you do miss part of it or you want to share it with someone later, it will be in our email list and it'll also be on our YouTube channel. So with that, Shannon, take us away.
Hey, well, thanks so much, Jay, for having me. I've really enjoyed being part of the Run Free team, I would say, in the last year or so. I've really enjoyed collaborating with you, Jay, and also some of your colleagues. And it was great to be at the Run Free camp last summer, and I'm looking forward to being back there in Flagstaff this summer. Now, one thing I'm notorious for is bringing sometimes too much content and going over time. That is a classic for me. So I'm going to bring a lot of content today. So there's some things that I might go through fairly quickly, but I would say if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to receive questions. And maybe I haven't necessarily shared my contact info on this PowerPoint, but I'm happy, Jay, if anybody reaches out to share my contact info for questions, because there's some stuff here that people might want a little more clarification on. Yeah, today what I prepared is just I thought to myself, like, when an athlete comes to me with the question of how can you help me give my best in this race that's important to me, I just brought everything that I usually bring, everything that I usually offer, and there's quite a few different things here, because they're usually, when I've been working with a lot of athletes, there ends up being different best things for different people. So I've just brought everything that I commonly use to share with you to try to help you have your best day in Boston. Now, what I want to share right off the bat is the lens through which, I look at my work, and the way that I look at human beings, and the way that I look at athletes to start with. And I think this is a pretty helpful lens for me to do my work well. And I think it's also a helpful lens for you to see yourself. And I do like taking this kind of big step back, this kind of global or meta step back, to look at the athlete as a whole and look at what they're trying to do as a whole, because I think who the athlete is as a whole person, and the kind of the lens they take on themselves and the lens they take on their race really affects their experience and really affects their performance. So we're going to take this big step back together to begin with. And then we're going to kind of get a little more micro and a little more into the nitty gritty of actions and ways to cope with challenges within the race. So I'm going to screen share for you. Oh, Jake, I can probably screen share, right? I might have to ask you for permissions.
Yes, 1 second. I
No
will make
problem.
you the
I
host.
forgot about that. I forgot about that.
No worries. Easy. All right, you should be good to go.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to share my screen. So one thing you're going to notice with my pictures, my slides, there's a lot of pictures on my slides, and photography is a passion for me, and I follow the NAU cross country team around a lot. So most of my pictures are of the NAU cross country team. But so there's a bit of a track and cross country theme here, but all the stuff, all of the points I'm going to be making are the same. They're applicable as well to for sure the marathon and for sure Boston. So I'm going to explain this slide. So there was a couple of years ago, I was in Flagstaff and I was walking north on San Francisco Street. And when you're walking north on San Francisco Street, you can see this big mountain that towers over Flagstaff, and it's called Mount Humphreys. If you come to the retreat this coming summer, you will see what I'm talking about. And Mount Humphreys is really beautiful. It towers over the town. It's very, very obvious. It's a beautiful peak. And on this particular day, I was walking towards it, and I was just having one of those great days. Like I was feeling confident in my work. I was feeling capable. I was feeling connected to the people around me. I was excited about any possibilities before me in my life. And I'm walking towards the mountain, and I was just thinking, man, like I feel like the mountain on a clear day. Like no clouds in front of the mountains, just confident, steady. And as I was walking towards the mountain, and as I was noticing how I was feeling, I thought, I think when I see myself this way, or when anyone sees themselves this way, as capable, connected, confident, like lots of possibilities before them, I think we're seeing ourselves the most accurately. Like that's the truth about you. When you feel like that, you are seeing yourself the most clearly. And I also was thinking, as I was walking towards that mountain, I was thinking that
Hey Shannon, let me interrupt real quick.
yeah,
Hey
yeah.
guys, if you're on jumping on, if you can mute yourself, Marine and a couple others. And Shannon, you also can you can hit participants and you can mute them.
You're right. I was just thinking that. I was thinking I think I have all Jay's controls. And so I'll do that if I hear that. No, thanks. That was great. That was great. You paused into that. All right. Yeah, I was in Flagstaff and I was looking at the mountain. I was like, man, I feel like the mountain on a clear day. I feel like I feel like when I'm seeing this way, this is me seeing myself clearly. And when anybody sees themselves this way, this is them seeing themselves the most clearly. And the reason why I say that is because in that moment when I was, kind of feeling confident and all those things, I could see my strengths, but I could also see my weaknesses. There's a few things I could improve in my life, and I really ought to maybe in order to be better in every role of my life. So it wasn't that I was seeing through rose-colored glasses. It wasn't that I was kind of on a high or anything like that. I think I just was seeing clearly because I could see my strengths and I could see my weaknesses. It was just my strengths outweighed my weaknesses, as opposed to the other way around. And I think for a lot of us, oftentimes where we wish we were better or wish we were different, or we have some fears or doubts, that often outweighs our strengths. And I'm staring at the mountain. I was thinking, man, this is not a bad metaphor, because in Flagstaff, oftentimes the mountain is clear, but there's also plenty of days when clouds roll in and clouds get in the way of the mountain. You'll have a cloud sitting on the mountain. You'll have a cloud like in front of the mountain. Some days the clouds are so thick you can't even see the mountain. So this picture here is a picture of a day of that exact same view I just showed you. It's a little bit more distant, but that exact same view I just showed you, and you would never believe there's a mountain behind those clouds, and I think sometimes that's how it can feel to be a person. So I'm just gonna do one more. Well, there we go. Oops, sorry. Yeah, so I was thinking this metaphor of the mountain and the weather is a pretty good metaphor for what it's like to be a person. And this is the lens through which I look at my work. I see when you are seeing yourself most confidently, that's who you actually are, and everything else is just weather. And the way that I see it is it's the best in you is already there, and it's my job to help you access it. So there's two kind of main angles I take on helping you access your best in a race. One of them is to help you see your mountain, clarify who you are at your best. And the other way is to help you dissipate your weather. Now, today we're gonna work a lot on seeing the mountain, or I'm gonna give you some exercises on helping you see your mountain. And then we're gonna work on kind of how to work with weather, both outside of the race and inside of the race. And what I mean by weather is it's just like nerves, fear, pressure, expectation, dread, and then there's some specific kinds of weather that can show up in a marathon. So we'll get to those as we go through our session today. All right, so the first step, seeing the mountain, I have three main questions that I ask athletes to consider in order to clarify who they are at their best. See their mountain, see clearly. And the first of these questions is, who do you want to be? And what I mean by who do you want to be, or the reason I ask an athlete, who do you want to be, is we can ask ourselves this question in basically any moment. And when we answer it, we usually feel energized and empowered. Once we've answered that question, we get clear about how we want to act, what we're going to do. And it's a question that you can ask in any circumstances. You can ask it when things are going well. You can ask it when things are going badly. You can ask it when you're feeling the way you want to feel. You can ask it when you're not. But what I ask an athlete usually in the lead up to a race that's important to them is, in this training block or around this race, who do you want to be? And that's a really big question, right? Who do I want to be? And so I'll often ask athletes smaller questions at first to help them. You guys can still see my screen, right? Oh, I'm back. Okay, I think you can see my screen. If you can't, let me know. All right, so I ask who do you want to be around this season or around this race? And that, what I mean by that is, what qualities of yours do you want to bring out? Now, this is a really big question. So there are some smaller questions that I give to athletes to help them to kind of get them thinking about how they want to answer the question of who they want to be. So the first question that I give them to help them clarify this is, who do you want to be this season? Or who do you want to be in this training block or around this race? How do you want to be described is a question that you can ask yourself to describe, to jog your thinking as to who do you want to be. How do you want to describe yourself? How do you want others to describe you? How do you want your coach to describe you? How do you want your competitors to describe you? How do you want your family to describe you? Who you were in this training block and in this race. The second smaller question that I'll ask athletes to help them clarify who they want to be is, what do you want others to learn from you? What do you want them to learn based upon how you act and maybe the perspective you take, and the way that you kind of prepare for this race and the way that you race this race? What do you want others to learn from you? And then another question I'll ask athletes to help them clarify who they want to be is, who do you admire? Like, what qualities does somebody that you admire have that perhaps you could embody? And could you bring those out in yourself? So probably later, today we're going to cover a lot of information, and this is a question that often takes some time to answer. But yeah, what I want to encourage you to do is sit down and ask yourself, like, who do I want to be in this training block for Boston? Or who do I want to be on that start line in that race? Write freely on those questions. How do you want to be described? What do you want others to learn from you? Who do you admire? What qualities do they have that you would like to bring out in yourself? And then once you've written freely on those questions, just look back over them and see if you can kind of distill it down to say like 3 words or a short phrase. And I would say try to keep it to 3 words or less, because I actually think 3 words or less has the most power. When we start to have more like 4 or 5 words, it becomes a memorization exercise as opposed to like a powerful exercise to shift your emotion. Or you can make it a short phrase, like a sentence or 2. But yeah, who do you want to be this season? And once you've answered this question, you have like a portable mental performance tool to carry around through the whole build and through the whole race, you know? Like probably some people on this webinar have like real regular jobs that maybe start at 8 or 9 a.m. and go till 5 or 6 p.m. You might be someone who gets up at 4 a.m. to do your training. I know lots of adults who do that. And that can be really hard, you know? So you could ask yourself when that alarm goes off at 4 a.m., all right, oh geez, who do I want to be? Or when you're in the middle of the workout and you're not hitting your paces and maybe you're waffling about maybe I should drop out. Maybe sometimes we should, but usually not, right? Usually you want to keep going. You could ask yourself, who do I want to be? Or you get in the middle of that race in Boston and you're going through an unexpected hard patch 12 miles in. Who do I want to be? You know? And so once you've answered this question, you have like a great mental performance tool tucked into your pocket. So that's the first exercise that I'll usually do with an athlete when I'm trying to clarify like who they are at their best. When I'm trying to help them see their mountain on a clear day, is ask them to clarify who they want to be, distill it down into 3 words or a short phrase, and kind of put it in their pocket. And what I mean by put it in their pocket is put it somewhere you see it a lot. You know, I know people who write it on their shoes. I've known people who put it on a bracelet. I've known people who put it on their phone screen. But yeah, this alone can be a pretty handy mental performance tool. I'm wondering, does anybody have any questions about that first part? You know, that first part of who you want to be. Sorry. Not right now.
So
Okay.
I've got one for you, Shannon.
Yeah.
So how do you handle the conflict of who you want to be in the moment and the fact that you might have made a mistake in your race? Like, in other words, like, you know, what if my 3-word phrase was, you know, consistency, and faith. And I just said, hey, I want to be consistent in my effort today, and I want to have faith that my training went well. Mm-hmm. But I messed it up. Like for Boston, for example, like one of the things that a lot of people make the mistake of is they go out super hard. Yeah. Because it's really downhill at the beginning. Yeah. And so what do you do when you've messed
if you
up?
get here at like 9:05 or 9, there's not much left. I think it's Kevin, daycare that's probably.
Hey Kevin, can you mute?
Oh, is it?
Shannon, can you mute Kevin?
I'm trying to see. I got my cursor back for a minute there. There we go. Hold on. I'm gonna let.
If you click on participant, and you can do it.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, cool. All right, sorry, no worries. But yeah, what do you do when like all of a sudden it might have to change?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a really hard one because you're so right about Boston. It's so down. People are feeling great, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh shoot, I went out 7 seconds per mile too fast, and now I'm blowing up, and I wasn't who I want to be." Yeah. Well, I think one of the good things about this exercise is it can be asked in any circumstance. So I think that question is super helpful because, you know, the people listening to this can then be ready, like, okay, you misread your pace, or you kind of let doubt get to you at some point. And okay, this is where we're at now. Who do I want to be now? Like, I think there's an additional skill that is necessary when somebody makes a mistake, and it's like let go of the mistake and focus on who you want to be now. Because I guess the other thing is the alternative is to kind of ruminate how you weren't who you wanted to be for the first 10 miles of your race, and then wreck your race, right? So man, we need an exercise on letting go.
It's funny. I was having this conversation with somebody today about the fact that one of the things that I enjoy about being 43 and still racing is the fact that the experience has given my mind the ability to adjust and think, even in the midst of absolute chaos.
Yeah.
Because I've been in chaos enough times that my game day play calling is actually really good, where I can adjust. And so it's interesting that you say you could do that exercise again. And it's almost like, it sounds like if you can understand who you are, create your mantra or who you want to be on that day, just doing that process creates the skill where you have the potential to do it quickly in the midst of a race.
Yes. Yes. And that, I think, is one of the great strengths of that skill, because it can be asked literally anywhere, anytime, if you remember to do it. I think oftentimes one of the greatest challenges with that exercise is remembering to do it. But if you remember to do it, you can ask it any moment in any circumstance. Who do I want to be? Who am I going to choose to be in this moment? And it becomes a source of control in a space where there's not often much that is fully under your control. Like you might have gone out, okay, maybe you've gone out 7 seconds too fast per mile. Now you're 10 miles into the Boston Marathon. You're like, shoot, I'm feeling too tired. Usually there's a real dire thought there, right? I've wrecked my race. I trained for it so much. I worked qualified. That's like where the thoughts will come in. And if you can get to a point where, like, whoa, remember, ask myself, who do I want to be from now on? I don't know, I think who we want to be matters to us, like I think us acknowledging, like, who do I want to be in this moment, that's important. And then because it's important, it can actually like shift our emotion and shift our focus so that we can make the best of that last 19 miles, like it's and then you can be proud. People get real proud of switching. Like one of the things I'll hear from people, who I've been working with is like, this happened in the middle of the race and I gave up for 2 miles, but I switched back. Like that's something people get really proud of. And it's a great tool to use to switch back, to get out of your dark place.
Well, and then in the marathon, even more so, because you can have 4 miles that you think you're done.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you can regroup and you can come back, and then all of a sudden you're back in it and you're like, whoa, that was a weird bad patch.
Yeah.
Cool. Love that.
Exactly. Good question. Okay, I'll keep going. I'll jump into the next part of our seeing ourselves clearly part. But good questions, Jay. We got a hand raised. Ellen, go ahead with your question.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was just mainly, I can't see any slides. So if you're starting again, I'm just wondering if you are.
I'll re-screen share. Yeah, I'll do that. Thank you for letting me know. I'll do that right now. There we go. All right, we're back. I think you can see them now, right? Good. Thanks, Ellen. Okay, so here we are. So the next question, to clarifying like who you are at your best, who you want to be at this race to some extent, is how do you want to see? And what I mean by how do you want to see is, what perspective will you take on this race? And I'm just going to clarify what I mean by that. So what do we mean by perspective? The lens through which we see something. Now, when I talk to athletes about, what perspective are you taking on this race, I usually hear a perspective that falls into one of 2 categories. And these 2 categories are either I have to perspectives or I get to perspectives. So I have to perspectives are usually centered around an outcome goal. So I need a PR. My perspective, like my reason for being here, is to run under 3 hours. Stuff like that, or for some of the other athletes I work with, it's, I need to finish in the top 10 or the top whatever. I have to make my coach proud. I have to beat so-and-so. So I have to perspectives are almost always some outcome focus. And they come with the sense of high stakes. They come with the sense that there's something to lose if I don't get this thing. I get to perspectives, on the other hand, are more, I would say they're more growth and experiential and development focused. So let's see how fit I am. I get to practice competing. I get to experience the Boston Marathon, right? Like that, I've never been to the Boston Marathon. I've been intending to go, but haven't been. And I just hear it's like no other place. You know, like the atmosphere is like no other place. Somewhere, it's to me, it sounds like an experience that you could just go be in for the sake of it. And so yeah, I get to experience the Boston Marathon. Could be something that falls into these I get to perspectives. Now I strongly encourage athletes to do their best to like find and adopt and take an I get to perspective on their races. And I'm going to explain why that is. I'm just going to also just check. Oh, here we go. You guys were telling, I just noticed the chat. You were telling me I'm not sharing my screen and we got it back. Okay. So here we are. Here we are on this slide. We're looking at two different perspectives. So on the left is this I get to perspective of I get to play the game of racing. You could phrase this is this one option. I get to experience the Boston Marathon, you know, could be one. On the right, we have this is my last chance to prove myself, or I've been training for 12 months and taking time away from my family. I have to PR at this race, you know, or something like that. So on the left, we have an I get to perspective. On the right, we have an I have to perspective. And I'm just going to walk you through the race and walk you through how that affects our psychology and our physiology within the race. So now these are going to be track images, but it's like exactly the same thing for a marathon. So here we have these two different athletes on the start line. You know, we have our athlete on the left with the I get to play the game of running. I get to experience the Boston Marathon perspective. And on the right-hand side, we have I have to PR because I've been taking time away from my family, and so it has to be worth it. The person on the left with the I get to perspective, because they have an I get to perspective, they're typically way more relaxed. Like an I get to perspective is not a high stakes, high pressure perspective. And because of that, there's a whole lot less fear in it. And when there's less fear, it's way easier for us to be focused and present and aware. And if we have a plan, which I'm guessing most of you will, execute your plan. You know, someone with a I get to perspective, I think is way more likely to go out at the right effort and like listen to their coach, you know? Whereas somebody on the right who's like, I have to, for whatever reason, have my best day at this race. There's fear there, you know, it feels like this high stakes thing. And it's really hard to be present, and it's really hard to be aware of like how fast you're running, what's actually going on, and what your plan is. All they're thinking about is how bad they need this to go well. And we'll see as the race unfolds how that can cause some problems. So here we are now, let's say a third of the way into the race, you know, and I don't think it matters what the distance of the race is at this point when you're a third of the way into the race. It's usually starting to get a little uncomfortable, like just a little bit. And our athlete on the left with the I get to perspective, she's planned for that. She knows that. And in her plan, she has a plan for that. So she's like, okay, 1/3 of the way into the race, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to focus on my pace, just 1 kilometer at a time. And in a minute, we're going to learn why that's helpful. Then we have our other fellow on the other side who has the I have to perspective, and it's starting to get hard 1/3 of the way through the race. And he's just like, oh no, I feel discomfort. It's, 1/3 of the way through the race. This is feeling hard. And he only sees that feeling as a threat to this thing he has to have, and this is especially, I think, risky and kind of, you might say, dangerous in a marathon, because the nature of a marathon is you can feel bad, then you can feel good, then you can feel bad, then you can feel good. So just like feeling a little bit bad early in the race does not mean that you're going to have a bad day. But what often happens when we go into a race with an I have to perspective, and we're super tense and we're super fearful, and we start to feel bad earlier than we want to, the next thing we do is our brain just jumps to how far we have to go. Like, oh geez, I'm 12 miles in, I have 14 miles to go, I'm already feeling bad. And it jumps to this conclusion, I'm going to have a bad day. And that's what happens in like these shorter races too. 1/3 of the way in, things are feeling bad. if they think about how far they have to go, I'm gonna have a bad day. This is 1/3 of the way through the race. Then now we're like, let's say we're 4/5 of the way through the race. And everybody's hurting 4/5 of the way through the race, you know, again, it doesn't matter what distance it is. And our athlete with I get to perspective, like I get to play the game of racing, has factored this into her plan. And she's planned in advance that later in the race, she's going to try to catch people. That's how she's going to keep moving forward. That's how she's going to keep her attention on the race. So that's what she's doing. How many people can I pass? Whereas our fellow on the right, what happened to him is 1/3 of the way through the race, he panicked because he was feeling bad. So he backed off the pace and he let the people go who he was with. And he already kind of bought into the story, I'm going to have a bad day. And now he's tense and he's upset. And he's continuing to have a bad day. And he's now like pretty much well off his goal. And he's not really considering or able to get back on track. And this is related to just another thing I want to share with you about the power of perspective. So in running, and I think this is true, it's true, and I'd say probably practically any race distance, probably 3K, probably like 3K and above, maybe even 1500 and above, but probably more and more true the longer the race gets is this is an endurance sport. And when you get to a point where you start to get to a point in the endurance sport where you're tipping out of homeostasis, right? Like you are taking in less oxygen than your body is actually consuming. Your body is consuming more oxygen than you can take in. You're starting to get some lactate around your muscles. You're starting to break down some muscle fibers. And your glycogen is depleting. Your nervous system is noticing that you're shifting out of homeostasis. And those first little feelings of fatigue or like exertion pain, it's just your brain going like, uh-oh, we're shifting out of homeostasis. Are we okay? But the thing is, in the early part of a marathon, for sure, in a marathon, you are so far away from actually being in danger. Like you have plenty of glycogen left. You're at a pace where, yeah, your body might be consuming more oxygen than it's taking in, but it's such a minor rate, like it's really, you're not anywhere near danger yet. You still have plenty of glycogen first half of a marathon. So the truth is that you're okay. But your brain's not sure. It's just super sensitive to any tip out of homeostasis. So when it notices this tip out of homeostasis, it checks in with your emotional climate. And it basically asks your emotional climate, like, are we safe? Are we okay? And if you have an emotional climate that's got I have to perspective, I have to get a PR, I have to this, and that nervous system notices that need and that tension, and that stress, oftentimes the nervous system will determine like, oh, this person's distressed at this point in the race. Like, I don't think we're safe. I don't think we're okay. And the nervous system will start to inhibit energy and inhibit exertion. Whereas if, let's say halfway through a race, you're starting to feel it. You're starting to feel a bit fatigued, a little bit of exertion pain. Your nervous system is like, hey, we're tipping out of homeostasis, and it checks in with your emotional climate. And instead of your emotional climate is like present, focused on the mile you're in, focused on your gratitude for being at the Boston Marathon, the emotional climate says, oh, we must be all right. Like, we're a little bit tipping out of homeostasis, but this person seems calm and interested and present, and it will allow the energy. So at first look, how you see the race, what's your perspective on it? It might seem inconsequential or just like afterthought, but how we see the race, like our reason for being there, our purpose, affects your nervous system. And it really affects your nervous system when you're inside the race and you're starting to become depleted and you're starting to tip out of homeostasis. So a perspective of like, I get to be here, I get to see how fit I am, I get to learn more about the marathon. That's going to help you so much in the part of the race where things start to get hard and your nervous system is checking in to make sure you're safe, is basically what it's doing.
Hey Shannon, I've got something that I experienced so many times, hanging out with the Kenyan athletes, professional athletes. At the highest level, you would think as an amateur, you would think that these guys are like super high strung and they're like, I've got to do this, I've got to compete, I've got to do this. But it's completely the opposite.
It is completely the opposite.
Yeah. You're like, hey, how do you think you're going to do tomorrow? And they're like, I don't know, I'm just going to get out there and see what I can do. And I'm a big basketball fan, and one of my favorites was Kobe Bryant. One of his quotes when somebody asked him, do you love to win or do you hate to lose? He said, neither. He said, I like to understand why.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
So good.
And the thought process there too, that I love the way you're framing this, because to me, it's like when you combine that idea of I'm going to see what happens, I want to know why, it gives you this ability to almost be like a third party observer, where you're watching yourself perform and you're making adjustments with a high level of intellect and a high level of curiosity. And it's going to influence the outcome. And you're just excited to see how. You're excited to see what happens. And then you're right. I've experienced that when I try to pump myself up to do something versus the counter of I let myself do something, or I get to do something. But yeah, I've thought about that a lot. Do I love to win or hate to lose? And like being in that neutral area, I've seen it with the Kenyan athletes. You can go hang out with the Kenyan athletes after a major marathon, and you have no idea who won and who lost.
It's so true. Yeah.
They're all acting exactly the same. They're all laughing, having fun, and even down to the guy that dropped out at mile 10.
Yes.
So anyway, I love this, and I think this is so valuable, guys that are listening and ladies listening. If you can get this mentality as an amateur and as somebody who's in this for fun, you will run.
You will. And it's so counter what we feel like we're told right through movies and through press, like other sources of media. Like I think every movie you watch is like Rocky, and Rocky wants it so bad, and Rocky's like dragging heavy objects around in the snow at 4 a.m. and it's like so you just think that's a way to get what I want is to need it and like force it, and it's just not really like that in running.
Yeah, I don't think it's like that in anything.
Yeah, I agree.
Like even in a sport like MMA or boxing where they talk a big game,
yeah,
they're really calm, cool, and collected when they're actually performing the sport. And that's who comes out on top a lot of the times is the person, there's a military saying too, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And it's like when you're calm and you're in it and you're in the moment, your movements are going to be faster and they're going to feel like it's slow. It's going to feel like it slows down.
It's true. It's true. No, great. Those are great points. I know. And everyone here is probably like, okay, now how do I do it? How do I get that perspective? Perspective is hard, actually. You can want it. You can want to have a different perspective, but I think our emotions and our old habits sometimes make it hard to actually have like a relaxed, I get to perspective around a race. And I'm going to share with you an exercise near the end of our talk today to work on it. I think it's really natural to want a different perspective, but then sometimes feel a little bit at a loss how to actually feel that way. It can be hard to let go of I have to's. Okay, well, I'll continue on and finish this. So yeah, usually here we have our athletes again at the end of their race. The athlete who had the perspective of I get to play the game of racing usually finishes with that perspective. Man, that was so fun. That was hard and fun. I get to play the game of racing. And then the athlete who finishes their race with a have to prove kind of perspective, they usually keep it, and they usually can't go on to their next race with it. And very few athletes notice that their perspective and their story about why they're there, is perhaps part of the problem. So Yeah, so your second part of if there's homework from this webinar, the first one is ask yourself, who do I want to be? What qualities do I want to bring out in myself around the race and in the race? The second one is, how do I want to see? You know, what perspective do I want to take on the race? And I'd encourage you to do your best to adopt I get to perspective, a growth, experiential, curiosity, interested kind of perspective, like Jay was explaining. Does anybody have any questions about any of that so far? I might see, I can't see everyone. So if you put a hand up, I might not see you, but you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question too. Right now? I don't think. Okay, we'll keep going. So the last question I ask, and this is where the bulk of the rest of our talk is going to be focused, because this is the question with the most layers, I would say, is what are you going to do? And what I mean by what are you going to do is, what are you going to do inside the race? This is really where someone's race plan comes in. Now you're going to see I've got a little note here that says the loose plan. And this is the loose race focus plan is kind of my way of helping athletes prepare how to focus and what to do inside the race. Obviously, this is a project that the coach needs to have a strong hand in, is what is the athlete going to do? But I'll walk you through how I usually do this with an athlete. And as we walk through the what are you going to do, we're also going to cover some ways to handle specific specific marathon related challenges that come up inside the race. So here we go. So what I usually mean by what you can do is the loose race focus plan. How does the person you want to be, and I might even include how does the person who you want to be and seeing the way you want to see, how do they execute a race? The way that I usually start this with an athlete is I get the athlete to just tell me in a few sentences how they want to race the race. Now in a marathon, that might be a little bit longer than a few sentences, you know, like, and I'll tell you just off the top of my head what I might normally hear. With a marathon, I'll often hear the athlete say, I want to go out at blank pace and I want to keep that pace for 10 miles. And that's fine. You know, I in some distances, we don't focus on pace so much, we focus on position. But in a marathon, especially the Boston Marathon, I think pace is your friend, and your coaches are going to probably be giving you very specific paces given the marathon distance and given the course. So I'm going to keep this pace for 10 miles is a perfect first focus. Then I might hear somebody say, partway through a race, it gets a little hard for me. You know, I usually get a little bit intimidated. Maybe 15 miles in, my legs are getting sore, and I sometimes get a little bit intimidated by that. So I just want to make sure I stay on the path that I'm in. And then they might say, okay, and then between 15 miles and 20 miles, I want to see if I can move up a few paces, or I want to see if I can speed up a little bit. Of course, in Boston, 16 miles is where the hills start. So then they'll say something like, I just want to maintain my position up the hills. Maybe I want to maintain position up the hills and pass one person on the down, or relax a little bit on the down. And then I just want to finish strong. You know, I want to finish strong into the crowds in Boston. This might be an example of what an athlete tells me when I ask them to describe how they want to execute a race. I'll often get them to draw on also actions that have served them in the past. And I'll also always ask them to share with me, like, what is your coach going to tell you to do? Like, especially if they've worked with their coach for a little while and they know what the coach's usual approach to a race is. Like, we of course want to work with whatever the coach is going to tell them to do. So then we kind of have our basic draft. You know, we have a few sentences where the athlete has described basically how they want to race the race. It comes from them and it comes from their coach, because I'm not a running coach. So that stuff I really want to hear from them and their coach what they're going to do, and then help from that point on. Where I usually start getting helping to construct this loose focus plan is after they have that first draft of those few sentences. Then I want to talk with them about, there we go. I want to talk with them about how do we want to divide up their race. And I want them to divide it into chunks. And there's a few reasons why I want them to divide it into chunks. So I think one of the one of the most damaging mental mistakes in a marathon and any race, but especially in a marathon, is when people start to feel uncomfortable early and then they start thinking about how far they have to go. I think there's probably aren't two thoughts more damaging to a performance than I'm getting tired and I have 14 miles to go. That thought alone, I think, can make the nervous system go like really, really stressed, and it can start to impact your brain's willingness to give you energy in a race. So before the race, I want to be intentional about dividing the race into chunks. So that might be 5Ks, 5 miles, landmarks on the course. It could be time. And then what I want to do is I want the athlete to have practiced in advance, keeping their attention in one chunk at a time. So in a second, I'm going to show you some examples of this. Actually, I think I might have, yeah. So here's an example. So this is a professional athlete from Boston, the Boston race in 2021. So, and I'll explain all the elements of the loose plan in a second, but right now I'm going to focus on the chunks. So you can see he said for the first 3 miles, he's just going to focus on being smooth. And what he means by that is he's going to treat that first 3 miles as like, he's going to think about that as the only thing he has to do that day. And maybe so this was a professional, he was probably running like 5:10 pace per mile or something like that. And he's going to focus on 5:10 per mile as smooth as he can, as if that's all he has to do that day. Then in the next 3 miles or by 6 miles, he's going to focus on his rhythm and stick to his rhythm in that part of the section of like the flattest section of the race. So his whole world is being smooth for 3 miles, and then his whole world is finding his rhythm for another 3. And this practice of focusing entirely on what you're doing only in one chunk of the race, it keeps your brain feeling safe and calm. Like for this athlete, running 5:10 per mile for 3 miles is like no problem. And if that's all he has to do, his brain's like, okay, just be smooth for 3 miles at this pace, no problem. Just find my rhythm for 3 miles, no problem. Now this athlete, he's a very experienced marathoner. And so he knows that for him, he needs to look forward to the hard part of the race. So between 6 miles and halfway, he's just like, this is the fun part. And one of the things he intended to do in this part of the race at Boston was to like look around and take in the crowds and just appreciate it. He's like, this is fun. Look at this energy, you know? He also wanted to acknowledge that part of the race can feel hard, but that's okay. You can come out of that. This is a commonality that I've noticed in a lot of people's mental plans for marathons is very early in the race. And you can see this fellow chose like between 6 miles and halfway to acknowledge it could feel hard in this part, and that's normal. A lot of experienced marathoners will, in advance of the race, prepare themselves for this part to feel not good and to trust that they can come out of that. So that's yeah. So let's say from 6 miles to halfway, this athlete is just planning to take in the atmosphere, have fun, be grateful, and be aware he might feel bad, but he'll come out of that. And that's like his whole focus for those for that chunk. Might as well walk through this whole plan. So yeah, then halfway to 16 miles, he's just focusing on being excited about the hills. He's an athlete that's strong on hills. So he's trying to build his excitement to get to that part of the race. 16 to 20 miles in, this is the fun part. Take some swings, so like, you know, take some chances. And then for him, the 5 miles between 20 and 25 miles, attack. That's his only focus for those 5 miles is attack the people around him. And well, not literally, you know, but catch people, race people. And in the last mile, let the crowd bring him in. So this is the basic chunking of a marathon. I have another one to show you. This was another athlete. This was their first marathon though. I'm sorry, their first Boston marathon. They'd only had one marathon before this. And you can see like this person has a different focus in different chunks, but it's the same idea. Like first 5 miles, just going to focus on relaxing. Second 5 miles, relax and take my fluids. Third 5 miles, be grateful for the experience. Fourth 5 miles, find my race. That means like find the people who are close to you, who you're probably going to be competing with to the end of the race. And then the last 10K, race a 10K with how this person wanted to frame it. I'm going to get to some of the other things, like who do you want to be is the thing at the top, purpose is perspective, and then adversity and these little tools. I'll get to those, but I want to finish the loose plan first so you can see the steps to designing the loose plan. So one way to design the loose plan is to look at the race, look at the race. And so now if I was working with you, you've told me basically how you want to execute. You've told me kind of what your coach wants you to do. We would probably pull out the course map and we would break the race into whatever you intuitively felt like were the right chunks. I think honestly, like you can see I have the Boston course map here. What I'm paying the most attention to, and usually the athletes I'm working with are paying the most attention to when it comes to a course map and how are we going to break it up, is the topography, the elevation, because those hills are going to make they're going to impact this race far more than any particular landmarks on the course. So it's the topography I'm most interested in when I'm helping an athlete break their race up. But yeah, the point of the loose plan is to break the race up into chunks so you focus on one chunk at a time. That's the gist of that. Does anybody have any questions about breaking, like the early part of designing the loose plan and breaking the race up? Any questions about that?
Shannon, I've got a comment that has been so helpful, especially with Boston and any other marathon. I loved where you said in the chunking in the loose plan, run 1 mile the same pace as the last mile.
Mm-hmm.
One thing with the marathon that everybody listening needs to think about, especially late in the race and especially Boston, one thing that happens sometimes is, from a physiology standpoint, your body gets used to running a pace. And sometimes in the marathon, what happens is your body is accepting the fact that you're running a certain pace, especially late in the race. And sometimes you can feel like you've slowed down, but when you actually look at the watch and the data and the split, you almost experience this numbing feeling to the pace. And the mistake is thinking you've slowed down when in reality, you're just in a good spot. And so the two ways that can go either right or wrong are if you think you slowed down and as a result of that, you give more effort. Mm-hmm. That can result in you slowing down just by virtue of the fact that you thought you slowed down. Mm-hmm. So being cognizant of your pacing late in the race, I think, is really important. And I love that thought of, I'm going to run the next mile the same pace as the last, and then pay attention to that pace. Because I've had so many stories of success in the marathon where the athlete thought they weren't going to make it. Mm-hmm. They were like, I didn't think I felt like I was running 8-minute pace, and I saw the watch and it said 6:30.
Wow.
So yeah, just really being at a high level of alertness towards the end of the race on how you're doing and doing those check-ins with yourself, and then calming yourself down when you see, oh my gosh, I'm still running pretty good.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, that especially with all the training too, like you were saying, right? You just become conditioned to run a certain pace. And at a certain point in the race, it might be feeling just bad. You're like, I can't believe I'm still on pace, but you actually are.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even Rory, I talked to him about, he just ran Seville and made the US or the Olympic A standard.
Yes.
And he said he had no idea he was going to make it.
Wow.
Until like, I think he said like 30 seconds out, because he thought he had actually slowed down and wasn't running well. And then, he just had doubt that he was going to hit the time until he actually crossed the line. So I just think it's always cool to like keep that like nugget of hope like in your back pocket.
No, I like that. That's really interesting about Rory. Maybe he was just being disciplined. Like, I'm not going to look at my watch. I don't want to know how bad it is. And then that didn't turn out to be bad at all.
Yeah, he ran 104.01 for the first half, 104.00 for the second half.
Crazy.
Yeah.
He really gave the best he had, you know, when you see something like that, you're like, man, you
Yeah.
gave the best you had.
Yeah. Yes.
That's
Unbelievable.
super unbelievable. Well, and Jay, I like that you bring up that run the same pace of as the mile you just ran. It's funny, the reason why that's there is it's actually there. This is a tool for adversity, and it's there because I think also one of the, they could say, triggers that cause an athlete to start giving up and thinking they're having a bad day is they start to not hit their splits. You know, like they're like, I'm supposed to be on 6:30. And I just ran a 6:42. And then like I think hope can just dive, right? And what I think some athletes try to do, and I think this is similar to what you said, it's not quite the same, but it's similar to what you said, is they'll be like, shoot, I gotta get back on pace, you know, or I gotta make it up, or they just like give up and it's like it's not my day. But I think because the marathon, you do ebb and flow so much in how you feel. Sometimes you can absolutely come back and get,
Yeah.
but usually forcing it too early just doesn't work. So let's say you're supposed to be running 6:30s and you just notice that you ran a 6:42. Just run another 6:42. Like just focus on another 6:42. And then
that is a brilliant way of thinking of it, because that takes a stress and it relaxes it a little bit.
Yep.
And then I've found in my own experience and in coaching as well that you know, success in running often comes through fluid movement and through being calm but intentional about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And yeah, that high stress level, when that thing gets up, you just start falling apart.
You do. It's just drama and emotion, right? Like when you're there and it's totally understandable. You're like super invested in this thing and now you're like super depleted. So we become the child versions of ourselves, right? And
isn't it weird though? Isn't it weird that to do well, in a sense, you have to almost like not care about certain aspects?
It's so true. Yeah, it's so true. You got to live like it's the most important thing in your life, and then when you get there, it's just a race.
Yeah, and you're just out there just doing your thing, whatever.
Yeah. It's an interesting skill set, right? To be able to do both those things.
It's frustrating skill set is what it is.
Frustrating skill set. Yeah. But no, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. And then, you know, like I've had athletes tell me, I remember one athlete told me like they got, I think 20, I don't know what it was. I want to say it was around 20 miles into CIM this past year or something like that. And they were 10 seconds slow of their goal pace all of a sudden. And they were thinking about dropping out. And they were like, well, I'll just run one more mile at this pace. And then lo and behold, they could see some competitor like came into sight. And so they kept at that pace and they caught them. And then they just started to speed up. Like they just like started to come back. And yeah, they didn't run the time quite they wanted, but they ran a pretty solid race, you know, and they were so much happier with having finished than dropping out. And they were just like, yeah, just sticking with what was there, you know, for that period of time was the key. It was just like, all right, I ran a 10 seconds slow. Let's just do another one that's 10 seconds slow. And then someone came back to them. They felt a little more encouraged and they picked up. So, yeah, that can be a good one. There's a couple, this might be the place. So I'm going to jump ahead to things that you can add to your loose plan to help you out. So we were kind of headed in that direction, right? So here we go. Effective additions to the loose focus plan. So one addition to the plan that I have found to be so helpful, this you would never believe it, but it's to add a deep, relaxed breath between your chunks. And which is so funny, like one breath between 5K, like is it really gonna help me? But it really does. Any deep, relaxed breath that you can take out there tells your brain that you're okay. Like, so honestly, you could do it every 5 minutes if you want, not just at the 5K, maybe if that's where you have your chunk, but any relaxed breath you can do out there relaxes your body. And what I mean by breath is just like a standard, usually a standard, like just relaxed sigh, like take in some air and then just let it out like a kind of a way. That communicates to your nervous system that you're okay. So pre-planning using the breath between your chunks is a helpful thing. The other thing is plan in advance for tough spots. So one thing that I was going to bring up about Boston is there's a lot of crowd and noise in Boston. And some people love that and some people find that totally exhausting and overwhelming. So if you love it, I would say utilize it and utilize it maybe where things are often hard for you, you know, like notice the crowds, try to feel a little bit buoyed by them and encouraged by them. If you're someone who gets overstimulated by crowds, you might want to have more of a calming practice for when you're around them, like noticing the feeling of your footsteps on the ground is a grounding practice. Noticing the feeling of your singlet on your body is a grounding practice. Noticing the breeze, noticing your breath can be a grounding practice. Usually, the way that I usually handle tough spots in a race is to break those chunks into smaller sections. So, if, for example, if you're somebody who you know around 30K, it starts to get hard. You might break that into you might do that 10K between 30K and 40K. 1K at a time. You might just focus on keeping your pace at 1K at a time or 1 mile at a time. Usually where things get harder, we make the chunks smaller. We've already sort of gone over the next part. Keep your thoughts in the now. So keep your thoughts in the chunk that you're in. That keeps you from thinking too far in advance and kind of making predictions about how the race is going to go. Now, use rebalancing or progressive relaxation to manage pain. That is, I think next I'll walk you through both of those methods. So we'll get to those in just a second. These are just methods of working with discomfort, and I'll finish this list and then we'll work with them. And then run 1 mile at the same pace you ran the last one. That is, you know, if you're feeling bad, you might just like Jay said, like just don't speed up, like stay running what you're running. You might be just fine and run a mile the pace you just ran the last one. Or if you're not, you know, if you are slower and you see that split and you get upset, just run 1 mile the same as what that last split was. And you just do it over and over, and you never know how you might recover out of that. And it'll keep you from giving up and make the race being way worse, I think, than it would have been. And then set a target for a specific number of competitive moves. So this approach might seem like more appropriate or more natural for like a professional athlete whose point is to like win the race or be competitive, but I don't think that has to be true at all. I think no matter what level we're at in a marathon, competing with other people can help us all give our best. The word compete actually means to strive together. And one of the best ways to help a person run their fastest race is to like pick people off at the end of a race. And it's not, to me, it's not the wrong spirit. It's not aggressive. It's not being a jerk. It's you're out there side by side, pushing each other to be your best, and you catching someone and going by them gives them the opportunity to like latch onto you and even go with you. But I find competing at the end of the race, like making it intention to catch people at the end of the race, can also make that last part of the race into chunks. So sometimes what I'll say to somebody is, okay, in the last 5K of a marathon, the last 3 miles of a marathon, like catch the closest person to you over and over and over. So the first, like maybe you got a person who's 100 meters ahead of you. That's your chunk you're focused on now, is that catching that person. Once you catch that person, your next chunk is catching the next person. And it just keeps you thinking forward, and it also keeps you thinking one little chunk at a time. And it's fun. You know, it's a game. It kind of makes it a little bit of a game, you know, at the end of the race. So I think one of the things that I know is pretty normal for a lot of like the adults that I work with is their number one focus is I want to run a personal best, or I want to break this time, or if it's a race other than Boston, I want to qualify for Boston, you know, like that kind of thing. And the people around you can feel kind of irrelevant, But I think what I'm saying is use them, and you can use them in the best spirit, especially late in the race. Like, so what I mean by set a target for a specific number of competitive moves, you can do it like I just said, like catch the next person to you, one person at a time. You can also say, I want to win a race in each mile of the last 4 miles. So that means I'm going to pick someone to catch that I'm going to catch before the next mile marker over and over and over again. So that could be one competitive move per mile, or one competitive win one race per mile. But yeah, if you set a target for that in advance, then no matter how you're feeling in the race, I think you'll be more likely to be thinking forward and competing with the best spirit, which is going to give you the best time, honestly, if you plan to do that in advance. So set a target for a specific number of competitive moves. I'm going to finish walking you through how to design the loose plan, and then I'm going to teach you about rebalancing and progressive relaxation. Okay. So how we do this, we design a loose plan, we remind yourself of who you want to be and how you want to see. On those loose plans I showed you earlier, you can see who do you want to be written at the top: confident, risk-taking, aggressive for this person, curious, present, grateful for the next person. And then the purpose is your perspective. It's why you're there. So this plan was for an athlete who's probably going to run a whole bunch more Boston marathons, and they meant plant a seed at this race. They meant have a good experience, so that when I come back, I have a good relationship with this race. The other athlete, the purpose for their race was to give myself a chance to finish high. This was a really, really good experienced professional, so he wanted to give himself a chance to win the race or place really highly. That was the purpose of him being there. Another thing I'll ask athletes to add to their loose plan is, how are you going to evaluate your race? And this kind of goes back to the idea of perspective. And I always encourage an athlete to evaluate their race based on something that they can control. So not a time. We're not going to evaluate the race based upon, did I win the race or did I run the time? Because that's not fully in our control. We want to evaluate the race based on things that we can control. So this athlete chose to evaluate his race on, did I take the chances that were available to me? Because he was working on his ability to be a bit more aggressive in the race. My other athlete sometimes struggles to stick to their plan. And he was going to evaluate his race based upon, did I run my race, as opposed to kind of get sucked into whatever was going on with the people around him. Did I stick to my plan? Yeah, and then also include what you'll do in a moment of adversity. And we covered a few of those, and we're going to cover a few other strategies to cope with adversity in a second. Yeah, decide how you're going to evaluate your race. Now, there's 2 more steps to using your loose plan to its full capacity, let's say. One really important one is design it a ways out. So the good thing is we have quite a lot of time right now before the Boston Marathon. So this is a perfect time to sit down and think, okay, how do I want to break that race up? How do I want to execute? What do I want my focus to be within each chunk? And then you start to practice it over top of your workouts or your long runs. And probably like your long runs, I'm guessing for many of you, you're going to have like a long run workout. And what I would do is, like, probably most of you aren't going to be running 26K or 26 miles some of you might, but probably not going to be running 26 miles in your training. So if you have a 20 miler, just break it up into roughly the chunks you would break your marathon up into, and practice what you're going to do in your loose plan in the race. Practice it in your training. Do it several times. Partly because that's going to help you know if like those focuses are going to work for you, and partly because then it's like it's a bit more automatic. One of the reasons a loose plan can fail is because people forget their plan, or they forget to use their loose plan. So practicing is really important, so it becomes natural, and it's not something you have to like intend to do. It's something you just do. The last thing you can do is you can visualize yourself executing your loose plan. My tip would be, focus on all the actions you're planning to take in that loose plan, and include discomfort in the visualization. So see yourself make the choices in the race that you have made in the loose plan. See yourself putting your attention in the race inside your visualization, that like the same, see yourself putting your attention in the visualization the same as you want to put it in the race. And then see yourself finishing proud and happy with your effort. I would not recommend seeing yourself finished with a time or placing that you're seeking. The reason is if you do that and the race starts to unfold differently than that, you will probably athletes are more likely to fall apart in the race if they visualize a particular outcome happening than if they just visualize themselves proud and happy with their effort. So really focus on just the execution and finishing proud and happy with your effort, and try to leave time and placing out of visualization. All right, so that's the general overview of the loose plan. Jay, I know we want to have some time for questions. And maybe what I'll do is maybe we do like 10 minutes of questions or so, and then I can walk them through these 2 practices for managing discomfort at the end.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, let's if anybody wants to throw a question in the chat, I am watching it right now. Had a lot of amazing tips and discussion already, so thank you so far, Shannon.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. It's a fun topic.
It's super fun to continue to learn. And I love the last thing you said too about visualizing yourself happy with your effort. There was a study that I read about kids taking math tests, and they praised one group's effort and then they praised the other group's score. Mm-hmm. And then they had them retest again at a later date, knowing that they were going to get praised either for their score or their effort. And the effort group outperforms the praise for the score group every single time. And you're talking about randomized, human study that's, been repeated over and over, where praising effort always results in a better result than praising scores and specific outcomes.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? It's a bit counterintuitive to like what our fear tells us, like our fear wants to hold so tightly to scores or times or finishing places. And yeah, that's a good study to share.
Here's a great question. So with the fact that certain races like Leadville or Boston or maybe a qualification for an age group race or a national meet with USATF or something, they all have time standards and cutoff times. So how do you handle the pressure of trying to hit that cutoff time while still maintaining the fact that you have to hit the time? How do you balance those 2 things and not be concerned with the time, but you've got a plan to hit the time?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. There's a few things I usually will share with athletes to try to help them with that, because that's a really valid question, because that's a tough spot for an athlete to be in, and they're often in that spot. The first way that I usually approach it is I try to help them to understand that an excellent race is the sum of excellent actions. And the quality of any one action is usually determined by how fully present we are within that action. And so if we are preparing for a race, or we are inside of a workout, or we're inside of a race, and part of our attention is on, I have to qualify for this, I have to qualify for this, I have to qualify for this, we're already giving away some of our attention and our presence to something that isn't relevant to this moment, so that it's relevant to your goals, but it's not going to help you execute this moment the best you can execute it. So I'll kind of explain that then, like, each moment is a little bit deprived of quality if you're thinking of what you have to have that actually isn't here in the now. So yeah, an excellent race is the sum of excellent actions, and excellent action, the quality of any action is determined by how present we are within it, is one thing I'll share with them. And then the other way I'll talk about it is, we talk about the ability to know that, we want something, or we know maybe we need something to move on to a certain level. We know the ability to know that and be fully present in a moment is a skill in running. And it's a skill just like aerobic capacity. It's a skill just like form or kick or anything. And we have to learn it. We need to practice it and learn it. So I'll often try to teach them strategies to let go, like to notice thoughts and let them go and get more in the now, so that we have some tools to develop that skill. We frame it as a skill to be learned. Like, we know you need that to qualify for the regional meet, but thinking about it's going to take away from your moments. So we need to learn how to let that go.
So in that moment, like you still got to pay attention to where you're at. And then are you looking at where you're at and then putting it away?
Oh, like inside of a workout or inside of a race, do you mean?
Yeah, because like if somebody's going to qualify for Leadville, you got to be at this time cutoff.
Yeah.
So you still have to be present you still have to be aware. But like, what do? You just do you've got to allow yourself at least an opportunity to check in.
Oh yeah. You're allowed to look at like, because part of execution is like what pace you're on, right? What pace you're at. I think there's a difference between checking in and being like, am I on my pace? And saying, oh no, I'm not, I just need to speed up. And like just speeding up a bit, or make it sound so easy, just speeding up a bit. There's a difference between that. Like, I'm supposed to be on 6:15 pace and I'm at 6:20. Okay, got to pick it up a bit. And to pick it up a bit, you might focus on cadence, you might focus on form, you might raise your effort level a little bit and focus on effort level. I think it's one thing to do that. And another thing to go, ooh, I'm supposed to be on 6:15 pace, but I'm on 6:20 pace. Oh no, I need 6:15 pace to qualify for this race, and start to talk, like, bring that into your thinking. Like, it's one thing to be, oh, too slow, speed up. How am I going to do that? Increase my cadence and put your focus on that. And it's another thing, oh no, my goal's in jeopardy. That's just not relevant in the moment when all you got to do is,
I've heard an explanation of this before by someone. I wish I could remember who it was, but they were talking about, it might have been you actually. They were talking about anxiety and the fact that a lot of anxiety comes from a problem that you give no action to.
Oh, that's good. That wasn't me, but I like that.
So it's like, there's a problem. I'm not on pace.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to give any tangible action to it. I'm just going to worry. Versus like what you just said, where I'm trying to qualify for Leadville, I'm halfway through, I'm 1 minute off, which is totally doable for a 100-mile race, to be 1 minute off and make that up.
Yes.
That's very reasonable. I'm 1 minute off where I need to be. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to go for a little bit higher cadence, or I'm going to switch my run walk from a 4-to-1 ratio. I'm gonna go a run walk of 7 minutes, and I'm gonna walk 1 minute. So I'm gonna change my ratio of walk run or run walk. And so, like, I wonder, is that kind of what you're alluding to, is like being aware of it and then having a tangible thing that you're gonna do in order to adjust?
Yeah, exactly. It is. It's basically just being task focused. Like, you're like, I know what the task is. Shoot, I'm not quite on it. Where should I focus now to help myself? And it's which is different than like, oh no, because of this might happen, which, yeah, it's true, but it's not right now. It's not helping us. The fact that that's the case isn't helping us execute. Yeah.
Cool. Let's see if we have any other questions.
I can see Marianne has her hand up. If Marianne would like to ask a question, you go ahead.
Okay. And you were answering my question, and I just wanted to maybe just explain a little bit. So I was in the 100-miler for Leadville. It has a cutoff time of 30 hours, which is actually pretty strict for a high mountain, above 10,000 feet, lots of elevation. And it's hard for someone who's already 60. Let me turn on my video. You can see me too. So I'm in my 60s and I've done a couple 100-milers before. And my very best 100-miler, this goes along with what you said, was when I was relaxed. I didn't even think about cutoff times because I didn't realize that I might have have trouble reaching those the times. So the cutoff times are at the aid stations throughout, like at mile 50, at mile 70. So at Leadville, when I started out, I set up my goals and I met the first goal, the first aid station, the second aid station. Then I started drifting behind and that got me anxious. And you know what I did? I didn't drink and eat enough.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
that's the action that messed me up. So
Yes.
so that needs more practice, the hydration, electrolytes, and food when you're in a hurry and how to get it quick. And so that's a skill for a 100-miler to get down. So.
That's a really good point or element of this to bring up. Yeah, yeah, because it can be so hard. We just kind of get briefly desperate, huh?
Get
And
desperate.
like what am I gotta force this now, and I'm gonna let go of the things I know serve me to try to force this.
Yep.
And probably Jay was saying, he's a more experienced athlete now. He knows better how to like pivot on race day to actually serve him. But in some of us in the early days with certain distances and stuff, maybe it takes a few of those desperate moves that don't pay off to be like, all right, like
Yeah.
next time, yeah.
Then you learn the hard way,
Yeah.
When you totally bonk and you almost pass out, then you did
Yeah,
wrong.
you do. Yeah, but that's so understandable. Like you share that. Thanks for sharing that. Like I bet a lot of people can relate to that in multiple forms, across their running.
Well, thank you. This has been awesome. All of this all pertains to the 100-miler too. So
Good. No, you're welcome. I'm glad you guys brought up Leadville. It makes me want to go to Colorado. That's a fantastic town.
All right. So let's see. I don't think there's any more. What do we want to go wrap up here in just a couple minutes?
Yeah, well, what I can do is I have 3 strategies I can share with everyone, which sounds like a lot in 7 minutes, but you know what? If I sample each one, we can do it in one meditation and I can sample each one and then people can take them away and make them
perfect. That's awesome. Let's do it.
So yeah, I have a few little tricks for you to be able to help yourself in tricky moments. The first trick is a way of moving your attention around when you're in pain to help you feel better. I call that rebalancing. The second trick is something called progressive muscle relaxation, which some of you might be familiar with. It's pretty standard sports psych technique, but it's a way to relax your body and become more present. Both rebalancing and progressive muscle relaxation you can use inside of an effort. And I know athletes who use both of them a lot. And so these are tools that I would recommend athletes practice in advance of the race, even outside of running, and then incorporate into your workouts and then incorporate into your race. There's those 2. And then I'm going to finish with a way to notice when your attention is going where you don't want it to go and bring it back. And I'll break each. We'll do like about 1 minute of each, and I'll break them. I'll tell you which one we're in as I break them up. But we'll do them all together in one meditation. So you get a little bit of a taste of each one. And then if you like them, what I would suggest is you just make them longer. Whichever one you choose to do, I'd say do it for 5 minutes instead of 1 minute by yourself. But yeah, I'd invite everybody to just make yourselves comfortable, and you can close your eyes. And I always start a meditation by making sure you're breathing with a soft belly, because when we breathe with a soft belly, we calm our parasympathetic nervous system. We enable our parasympathetic nervous system to calm us. And this first method is called rebalancing. And the reason it's called rebalancing is because it rebalances our brain's perception of pain. Those first moments in a race when you start to feel uncomfortable are actually your brain noticing a tiny shift out of homeostasis and actually amplifying it. So this method will help bring it back into balance. So we start out actually by letting your attention rest on the part of your body that feels uncomfortable. So maybe your quads are starting to feel a bit tired, let's say. You would let your attention rest on your quads. And you would, this is going to sound funny, but you explore them with curiosity. So what I mean by that is you ask some goofy questions. You're like, what color is this feeling in my quads? What shape is the feeling? Maybe it has a texture. Maybe it has a sound. Just ask some goofy questions that may or may not actually have an answer of the feeling. And the point behind doing this is just to meet the feeling with curiosity, as opposed to like upset or judgment. This is bad. This is a threat to my race. Instead, it's like, oh, this is interesting. What color is it? What shape is it? And you study that feeling for 10 to 20 seconds. And then you move your attention to a part of your body that does not feel uncomfortable. I'd say a part that feels neutral or positive. And you study that for 10 to 20 seconds with the same questions, like what shape is it? What color is it? What texture is it? And you go back and forth and back and forth. And I'd say do that for 2 to 3 minutes. It takes 2 to 3 minutes to help you usually. So back, forth, 10 to 20 seconds of curiosity on the uncomfortable part, 10 to 20 seconds of curiosity on the comfortable part. And oftentimes you will find the discomfort becomes improved. You become less uncomfortable. That's one of the most common tricks that a lot of athletes use in marathons that I work with. Okay, that's rebalancing. The next strategy that I use is progressive muscle relaxation. And the way that I teach progressive muscle relaxation to start with is to start doing it outside of running. Start doing it just sitting or lying down. And you work from head to toe. And you tense and hold for 5 seconds. And then relax large muscle groups. So you'd start with your head and you'd like scrunch up your face and you hold those face muscles tight for 5 seconds. And then you release them. And then you go to your shoulders and you hold those tight for 5 seconds. And then you release them. And then you go to your arms and you either curl your biceps or hold them out for 5 seconds and then you release them. And then you go to your glutes and your abs, your quads, and then your lower legs. And the point here is to hold that tension to a point of discomfort and then fully release it. And it's a way that you can just, you can bring full relaxation to your body. Oftentimes we're not aware that our body is tense. And this can help bring full relaxation to your body. And when our body is relaxed, our mind becomes more relaxed. Now, once people have practiced this from head to toe on their own outside of running, the brain starts to understand that when you tense and relax a muscle group, because you've been practicing so much, it's going to lead to your whole body relaxing. So eventually you can get to a point where you just tense and relax a fist and your whole body will relax. So athletes need to practice this, I'd say, for a couple weeks before a big race in order to have their brain trained so that when they just tense and relax the fist, their whole body relaxes. But that's where it can get. So you can get to the point where you're in a race and you just tense and relax the fist and your whole body relaxes. But it takes using this practice regularly to get to that point. So that's progressive muscle relaxation. The last exercise I want to share with you is something called the RBF meditation. R stands for recognize, B stands for breathe, and F stands for focus. So the R means if you notice you're thinking things you don't want to be thinking, maybe you have some I have to perspectives around a race. Maybe you're inside the race and you're like, oh shoot, I need to speed up to get my time, and but maybe you're gonna like Marianne kindly shared, you're gonna forget to eat or something like that. You recognize, I am in weather, or this is a perspective I would prefer not to have, and then you go to the breath. And I usually recommend that athletes go to the breath for 5 minutes. You focus on the breath for 5 minutes because that brings your fear down. And then you focus on who you want to be, how you want to see, what you're going to do. You go back to the words you've chosen for who you want to be. You go back to your purpose for the race, the perspective you've chosen, your I get to perspective, and then you go back to the plan you've made for the race. So recognize I'm in weather. I'm thinking a way I don't want to think. Breathe the fear down for 5 minutes, and then focus. Who do I want to be? How do I want to see? What am I going to do? Because the mountain on a clear day, that's what you are, and everything else is just weather. And when you're ready, you can take a deep breath and open your eyes and come out of the meditation. That was a speedy one, Jay.
Yeah, that was a quick one. That's great though. No, I mean, I think the idea there is creating margin in your day to do things that give you an acknowledgement of where you're at, your presence, and allow you to start to control certain things. Yeah. I use the breath out a lot. I use it in training. I use it during my work day. I use it when my children upset me. And there's a physiology to that too, where a friend of mine that's a cardiologist was explaining when you hold your breath in a little bit longer, you actually get some vasodilation. Like your body senses that your breath didn't leave as fast. And so when you're holding it a little bit longer, you have that oxygen in your lungs a little bit longer, and your body knows it's there, and it like opens things up a little bit. So yeah.
That's cool. I didn't know that. That's a really great little tidbit.
Yeah. Well, cool. Shannon, thank you so much for this. We're going to definitely have this on YouTube, and we'll send it out over email. As always, if anybody needs anything, you're welcome to shoot an email or do our free consult on the Run Free Training site. And Shannon, thanks again, and we'll see you at camp this summer in Flagstaff, and we hope to see some of our listeners here at camp as well. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay. See you soon.
Yep, you too.
Bye.
Let me.
Oh, maybe I need to do it.
Oh, I think I can take back over. Hang on one second.
Okay.
Reclaim.